and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 325, and today's date is March 27th, 2014, and the title of this episode is The Economic Recovery Illusion is Losing Steam, and the Collapse is Quickly Approaching. And how do we know this? Well, let's go back to 2008. We had a collapse of real estate. We had a collapse of the financial system. We had a collapse of pretty much everything at that point. Americans lost 38% of their wealth. The government had to step in because all these financial institutions were pretty much done and they had to be bailed out. Once they were bailed out, the Fed looked around and said, this economy is not going to do well. We need to start printing money and start pumping up the stock markets. And again, we need to take all this real estate, take it off the books of the banks, and we'll just put it on the Fed's books. And this is all they did, was they transferred everything, moved everything, and we need to also give money to Europe and to the Eurozone. And this is what they did ever since. They've been pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping. And it reached the point where QE wasn't doing anything anymore. It reached the point where if they continually to pump, the whole thing would have exploded. So they had to deflate it a little bit to make everyone still believe that we're in a recovery. And they're doing this to get this next event started. And again, in Europe, what we're seeing is unemployment continually going up. In the United States, we're seeing unemployment go down. Why? Because here they've changed the calculation. They really manipulated it to keep this illusion alive. And again, everything they're telling us is completely false and fake because it doesn't match what we're actually seeing with our eyes. I mean, we're seeing retail stores closing. We're seeing real estate decline. And they're telling us more and more people are getting jobs. And it doesn't fit into this model. But out in France, we have the president out there, and he was telling everyone that, the French economy is improving, unemployment's going to be going down, everything looks great, and he kept this up going. And now what we're seeing, and we saw this before, unemployment is going up. The number of people out of work in France surged in February by 31,500 to a new record level. And again, their unemployment rate is standing at 10.2%, and we're going to continually see this go higher. We see the same thing in Greece, the same thing in Spain, in Italy, in Portugal. It's always the same thing. Oh, don't worry, we see growth in the economy. We see unemployment going down, and especially when it comes towards elections, they really lay it on thick that they're actually doing something. And we know for a fact all of this is a complete lie because what we're seeing is the absolute opposite. Now, in the corporate media, they've been saying that people have been dropping out of the labor market because they've just given up. There's just there's a lot of jobs out there, but I don't want to take one right now, so I'm just giving up. I mean, does this make sense to anybody? It makes no sense to me, because this is what they're trying to convince us of. They're trying to convince us that these people who are on the extended unemployment, which ran out, they don't want to go for a job. Why? Because they're just going to give up. There's so much employment out there that I don't really want to do it because I'm just giving up. It makes no sense. So I'm just going to drop out of the labor force, and I'm just going to sit here all day long. It makes no sense in what they're saying. And the reason people are actually giving up, or not really giving up, they can't find the work because it doesn't exist. And every time, and I'm talking to a lot of people, they put their resumes out there, and I've been speaking to a lot of college graduates. They're pushing their resumes out there. They just can't find the work. This is the problem. Those people who are working in their industry for many years, who got laid off, put their resume out there. They're getting no feedback back. No one is contacting them. They can't find work. And this is why they fall off the stats. It's not because they're just giving up because there's so many jobs out there. That is absolutely ridiculous. And if you look, most of the older generation are taking part-time jobs right now, and I did a report on this, that's increasing, and the teen jobs are actually decreasing because they can't make ends meet with their retirement because inflation. Everything has gone up in price, and their retirement money they're receiving is not enough to sustain them, so they go back to work part-time to keep up with what's going on in the world. And what we're seeing right now is that all programs are starting to get cut, making it more difficult for people. They cut the extended unemployment. They cut food stamps. And again, in my other reports, I reported that Walmart, their whole entire model was dependent on government money. And now it's come out that that's actually true, that they are dependent on government money, and that is their business model. And it was in their shareholders' facts, in their stock shareholder document, and it was buried within the long list of risk factors disclosed to its shareholders that is outside of our control that could materially affect financial performance are these: changes in the amount of payments made under the Supplement Nutrition Assistance Plan and other public assistance plans, changes in the eligibility requirements of public assistance plans. Walmart followers say this is the first time the company has made a disclosure like that their model was dependent on government money. Now, all this crap that they were talking about in the beginning when they were saying, oh, it was the tax returns, this is why sales are going down, and the food stamps, that part was true. But the main reason why stores are not doing well and people aren't rushing in to buy more is because they don't have work. They don't have the disposable income to pay for what's in the store. Because if the food stamp money dropped, the people still need food. They would buy with their own money, but they don't have extra money to buy the food. And this is why they're setting up this website that will help you compare prices all over the place with other supermarkets to compare it to Walmart, because they're trying to get people in to their supermarkets in Walmart because they realize people will still have to buy food. They might not buy the clothing, they might not buy the electronics or the other doodads and goods that they have in the store, but they know they can push the food at cheaper prices to push their earnings up, because right now they are hurting because the American people are tapped out, and that is what we are seeing right now. Now, there are a lot of retail stores that are struggling right now. Toys R Us, they are struggling. Levi Strauss, they are struggling, and they are laying off people. Levi's laying off 100 people. Toys R Us, they're laying off 500 people because they're trying to restructure. The economy is not doing well, and this goes on to say that jeans maker Levi Strauss and toy store operator Toys R Us announced the planned layoffs after reporting weaker sales. And again, they tried price slashing. They tried it all throughout the holidays, but guess what? Their sales were weak. Even on their online systems, they were weak. So everything was weak across the board. And this is why they haven't closed stores yet. They're laying off people first. Now again, if they were saying that people were going to online sales instead of brick and mortar, we would have seen a switch from the brick and mortar to online sales in Toys R Us during the holiday season, and that would have seen a huge increase, which would have helped them out in the long run. But guess what happened? That didn't happen, and they are struggling. Now, we're also seeing a casino that is closing in Mississippi, and this is Harrah's Casino, and they will be laying off 1,300 people. So far, I've been seeing a lot of layoffs from a lot of places. And if we go back to the beginning of this year, in January, I mean, we saw Dell at 15,000, IBM at like 10 to 13,000. Barclays, RBS, Bank of America. I mean, we're talking about thousands upon thousands of people. This is not hundreds of people. These are thousands of good-paying jobs. And then we go to the retail end of this, and we're seeing stores. I mean, just think about this. Radio Shack closing 1,100 stores. Abercrombie & Fitch closing 180 stores. Barnes & Noble shut down a third of its stores. Aeropostale, 40 to 50 stores. JCPenney, 33 stores. Macy's, 5 stores. JCPenney is also laying off 2,000 people. Same thing with Macy's, 2,500 people. Sears closing 300 stores. Staples closing 225 stores. And there are many, many, I mean, I can go on forever here. There are so many store closing. It is ridiculous. This just goes to show you what the government and the Fed is showing us is completely the opposite of what's actually going on. And this is the lead-in to what is coming, because this happens first. Then the collapse happens, just like we saw in 2008. We saw real estate declining. We saw retail declining. We saw financial institutions laying off left and right, all over the place. But the market was still going up. And this is the same thing we are seeing right now. There is absolutely no difference. And now in the housing market, again, a complete disaster. They've tried everything. They pumped it up the best they could, and now they can't do any more. It has reached the top, and the drop down is going to be fast and hard, and everyone better hold on. Zip Realty out right now is out there saying it analyzed all its transactions from January 2012 through December 2013, and it concluded that 1 of every 4 real estate transactions closed without financing. You know what that means, right? That means hedge funds, investment companies paid in cash. It wasn't people. We are in big trouble. And what we're seeing right now is, and this goes on, this is from Zip Realty, based on our own internal analysis and data from the National Association of Realtors, the percentage of all cash real estate transactions may actually be moderating. Nationwide, the percentage of all cash real estate transactions reached a 5-year high in 2010, and since that time, it has been slowly coming down where they're getting out of the market. And what they're seeing right now in the last year is the biggest part where they're leaving the market. Why? They pumped up the housing as best they could, and now we're at the top, and they need to get out. But the problem is there's no one to offload these houses to. There's no American out there that can buy these houses. They've been trying everything. Adjustable rate mortgages. They've been trying to get the subprime people in there. But again, you know, subprime people, bad credit, not a great job, maybe a part-time job. They're not going out. That's the last thing on their mind, to get a home. They're just trying to make rent right now. They're just trying to put food on the table. They're looking for a better job because the government tells them there's a better job out there. Go find it. But they can't. They've been looking and looking and looking, and there's nothing out there. And the biggest cash purchases, the biggest percentage are in these areas, and these are the hardest hit areas that we saw, most of them. Las Vegas, 48% to pump that market back up. Orlando, 43% to pump that market back up. Chicago, 33% to pump the market back up. Richmond, Virginia, 32% to pump that market back up. Los Angeles, 29% in cash to pump that market back up. This is what they've been doing all along. They cannot keep this up. The big players are getting out. We are going to hit rock bottom very soon. Now, there's another report out there saying home sales plunge most in 3 years. This is terrible. The number of sales has dropped 8 months in a row. Pending home sales fell 10.2% year over year. This is the worst that they've seen it in 3 years. Why? Because the big players have left the market. There's no one there to take up the slack. This is what we're seeing all over the place. This is our big problem. And they realize this. They realize retail is imploding. Real estate is imploding. They realize people cannot find work. This is why you see them continually manipulating the numbers. Every day they're out there saying, you know what, we're going to now change GDP and include, let's include health insurance in this. Let's include research and development in this. Let's change inflation one more time and include housekeeping and cleaning services. And this is what they've been doing. They've been manipulating, changing, creating the illusion, and they're running out of ways to do it. And this is why you see the buildup in Syria. This is why you see the buildup in Ukraine. This is why you see the buildup in Africa and the Middle East, because they are desperate. They're running out of options. They realize the economy cannot sustain itself, and they really need to get something going, like an event, to take all eyes off of the Fed and the U.S. government, and this will come crashing down. Now, we understand that the United States, the government, wants to disarm all of us because it makes it easier for them to control us, and this is really what they want in the end. And what's always interesting, it's always those people who want to disarm you are the ones that are dealing in gun trafficking, are the ones that have weapons. It's always those people that are saying that you don't need a weapon are the ones that are dealing in it or have weapons. This happens every single time. And right now, a California state senator, with those draconian gun laws that they keep implementing with Dianne Feinstein and other government officials, he's going to be indicted on arms trafficking. And he was the one pushing for gun control legislation in California. Federal prosecutors unsealed an indictment against California State Senator Leland Yee and accused him of conspiring to commit wire fraud and traffic firearms. Very interesting. According to the indictment, Yee and Jackson defrauded citizens of honest services and were involved in a scheme to traffic firearms in exchange for thousands in campaign donations to the senator. Ironically, Yee has been fighting for more gun control in California. This is why you don't believe all of these government officials, because they are in it for themselves. They know exactly what they're doing. They are corrupt, and I'm going to tell you right now, we need to start cleaning out Congress. We need to start over. We need to make new rules and regulations that there'll be no more donations, that there'll be no more campaign funds. There'll be nothing. You get nothing. You cannot meet with corporations. You cannot do any of this. You still keep your everyday job. This is not a full-time job, a government job. This is a voluntary job where you give up your time to help the country grow. And we need to change what is happening in Congress at this time. Now, we understand out in Ukraine, Crimea had a referendum, and now it's part of Russia. And again, the UN Security Council got together saying that this was illegal, but Russia vetoed and China abstained, and that was done with and over with. But now, what the central bankers, U.S. government, is trying to do is to show that all the other nations are supporting that this was completely illegal. But again, the UN General Assembly doesn't really do anything. It can't enforce any laws. There's no veto power in there. It's really the UN Security Council that has this power. But again, 100 nations declare Crimea referendum illegal, with 11 against and 58 abstaining in largely symbolic resolution. Unlike the more powerful Security Council resolutions in the General Assembly cannot be vetoed but are not legally binding. And this is just to show and try to get all those nations, of course they were all the private Western central bank nations that are agreeing to this, and most of them have puppet governments, showing that this was completely illegal, but it really means nothing. It's just showing the world that, look, see, we were right. Again, this has no bearing on anything, and most of the nations that voted were from the private Western central banks to prove that this referendum they believe is illegal. But it doesn't matter because it happened already. Crimea is part of Russia. Now, the IMF is going to give Ukraine a bailout. And Ukraine said, you know what? We don't like the deal, and we're not going to accept it. And again, this is ridiculous. This is the whole point of it, is that the central bankers were going to come in, take over the country, put them on the EU, and loan them a lot of money to put them into debt, just like Greece, Cyprus, and make the people suffer. This was their plan. But they don't like the terms. The acting government. As part of the IMF agreement, the Ukrainian government agreed to cut the budget deficit to 2.5% of gross domestic product by 2016 and to raise retail energy tariffs toward their full cost, according to the Washington-based lender. Now, they disagreed on these terms, and they want different terms at this time, and at the same time, the Senate passes Ukrainian aid bill with Russian sanctions. It's amazing how fast the Senate can pass these bills that are giving billions of dollars to aid a foreign country, but snub their nose on Detroit, which is in the United States, who was asking for help, and they said there was absolutely no money to help them. It is completely amazing that the money can be sent overseas, but not within the United States. You know why? Because they don't get anything from it. The money here doesn't give them anything. The money out in another country allows them to loan it with interest so they can make money. And when I say they, it is the central bankers, and this is why you're seeing this happen. So what's really happening in Ukraine, their economy is really set to shrink 3% this year. Inflation is going to be about 12 to 14%, and they're going to have a very, very rough time. And the people in Ukraine are going to have a rough time because they're going to see costs go, actually the value of their money go down, and it's going to seem like costs are going up. And again, the new non-elected Ukraine government, the acting government, wants to disarm the people, is making the people work harder now. Their energy costs are going up, and now the country is going to be in debt to the IMF once they work out the details, which they eventually will, and everything will be okay at that point. Now, we understand that the US, Canada, Europe, they're all imposing sanctions on Russian individuals. The Swiss decide against Russian sanctions at this point. The Swiss federal government on Wednesday decided not to impose sanctions against Russia for its seizure of Crimea, claiming it wanted to find a balance between international law and Switzerland's interests. And it seems like they want to be neutral. They don't want to get involved in any of this at this time. Now, we understand that Visa, MasterCard, and the payment processing, they've been limiting payments within Russia, and Russia is looking at a new payment system, and it's called the Pro 100, and they're going to develop it. It's going to be ready in a couple weeks, and they're going to get off of that payment system and use their own. And right now, Putin has expressed regret over the decision by a number of companies to limit the operation of their payment processing system in Russia. It is a great pity that several companies have made a decision about well-known restrictions. I think this will simply lead to them losing certain segments of the market, and quite a profitable one. And they're going to lose a lot, and it's really going to hurt these companies once they get off of their payment systems completely. And I think they just kind of screwed themselves over at this point. Now, President Obama was out there trying to convince everyone that the Russian annexation of Crimea is worse than the Iraq invasion, and I'm sitting here going, whoa, how could that possibly be? Because if we really look at it, what happened there? We see that hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and it cost trillions of dollars for the United States to go into Iraq. Now, what do we see in Crimea? Nothing. No invasion, no war, didn't really cost anything, and the people voted. And the U.S.-backed dictator of Iraq now is Nouri al-Maliki, and he is ruling the nation with an iron fist as the country slips back into civil war. So let's see. We have the U.S. puppet government in Iraq fighting the people of Iraq because the people of Iraq do not agree with what happened. They want their country back. And the president is trying to convince the United States and the world that the annexation of Crimea was a lot worse. Well, no one died in Crimea. There was no invasion with troops. The people voted that they wanted to be a part of Russia. We saw military men in Ukrainian army decide to go over to the Russian side. If they didn't want to, they were free to leave with their weapon. And we saw towns and other military commanding officers also move to the Crimean side. So how could this be possibly worse? It isn't. He's making this up. Think about it. In Iraq, in Lebanon, in Libya, in Yemen, the United States are still in these countries, flying drones and bombing people who want their country back. And of course they call them Al-Qaeda terrorists, but really they are people who want their country back. The only reason the United States went into these countries was to take what they had, put it on the US dollar, and put a private Western central bank in that country. Because if you look at each one of these countries, they were selling their oil not using the US dollar. And again, we've made it worse. Hundreds of thousands of people have died. People are suffering. The country is in debt. So this is not better. It is actually worse. Now, we understand that most of Ukrainian warships have moved over to Russia, and right now, and this is about 30 warships, and right now the Ukrainian Navy could enter into Russia's Black Sea Fleet by the end of the year, but only after they pass inspection. And ships that were sailing previously under the Ukrainian flag will not be automatically included in the Black Sea Fleet until they have undergone a technical evaluation and they can decide which ships will enter the fleet and which ones will be scrapped at this point. So it's not like it's an automatic thing where, oh, look, we took their fleet, now we're going to all use it. They're looking at the ships. If they're old, they can't be used, they're going to be scrapped, and the other ones are going to be inspected. So it's not an automatic, oh, let's just use them for battle to invade the rest of Ukraine. That is not what's happening. And if we look at what's happening with Ukrainian military, out of the 18,000 Ukrainian military, less than 15% chose to leave. The rest went over to Crimea and Russia. Now, we hear a lot of propaganda out there about the Pentagon, about the corporate media, who is saying that, you know, Russia is building up troops along the border. They're having them move into Crimea, and we have the Ukrainian acting president and the prime minister out there saying 200,000 troops. Oh my God, they're all around the border, and they're ready for invasion. Well, the Pentagon sees no evidence whatsoever that Russian forces on Ukraine border are conducting exercises. As many as 100,000 Russian troops have been sent to Ukraine's border supposedly to conduct military exercises, but Pentagon officials say there hasn't been any proof of that, and they're not really worried at this time of what's going on there. And we've seen, and this is coming from the Pentagon, we've seen no specific indication that exercises are taking place, Kirby said. Defense Minister Shoigu assured him that this was for exercise purposes only. And again, they're not really seeing what is being reported because it's not actually happening. Russia is not moving into Ukraine with mass military forces. They're not taking it over. If they were going to do it, they would have just done it. They would just trampled everyone, and they would have gone in there and taken over Ukraine. But if you look at the actions of Putin, this is not how he works. He doesn't just move in. He could have just done it in Syria. He could have just let United States move into Syria. It would have given him every opportunity to help Syrian bring in Russian forces and start World War III. If you really look at it, the only people that are talking war are the United States, are the lawmakers in the United States, the Ukrainian acting government. These are the only, and European nations, NATO, they are the ones who are talking war, beating their chests, saying, we're going to war, we're going to war. We are not seeing this from any other source except that. Now, we understand that we're in Africa, and the United States has, brought troops into Africa, and they're trying to tell us, we're there because of the incident in Kenya, and we had to go to Sudan. And right now what we're seeing is a huge buildup of more and more troops moving into Africa. And we know why this is happening, because China has set up a clearinghouse in Kenya, and we understand that most of the nations are starting to drop the US dollar in their reserves and take on the yuan. And we see this happening, and again, France and other nations, especially the United States, are protecting and controlling the natural resources in this area, and China has been pumping in billions of US dollars to build up the infrastructure, because what else are they going to do with their US dollars? They're buying gold with it. They're pumping in all these nations with US dollars to build their infrastructure and help them mine their natural resources, and the US government cannot have this happen. And right now what we're seeing is the actual build up and increase of more forces in Africa. And last year, according to AFRICOM Commander General David Rodriguez, the U.S. military carried out a total of 546 activities on the continent. This represents a 217% increase in operations programs and exercises since the command was established in 2008, because they knew they were going to need to do this. They knew they were going to need to bring in more troops. They knew exactly what was happening. They needed to keep this dollar propped up, and all these countries, in line right now. And right now, from previously undisclosed U.S. Army African records, reveal a 94% increase in all activities by Army personnel from 2011 to 2013, and it's continually going up, including a 174% surge in state partnership missions and a 436% jump in advice assist activities. And if you look at the number of countries we're in Africa, the United States, we are all over the place here. We're in almost every single country in Africa, trying to keep control, trying to keep China out, trying to keep the US dollar in the reserves of these countries, to keep this dollar propped up. Now we understand that they want to start some type of war in Syria with Russia, with Iran, with North Korea, with China, and they don't care. And I'm talking about the central bankers, U.S. government. They don't care where it is, because all the players are the same. They're all intertwined, and they will all get involved. And right now, the State Department officials on Wednesday, they are insisting that the international push to remove chemical weapons from Syria has benefited, not punished, Assad. Again, and I'm talking about the central bankers, U.S. government, never just wanted the chemical weapons gone. This wasn't their goal. Their goal was to remove Assad. Their goal was to have him removed, have a puppet government put into place, have all their natural resources put on the US dollar, and block Russia from making a deal with Syria. This was their goal. Hey, it sounds like Ukraine, actually. It's exactly what they did there. And they lost out there too. They couldn't make it happen. They lost the areas that they wanted. And now they're focused back on Syria. Again, Ukraine, they're just using what they can at this time to save face. They're putting these ridiculous sanctions. They're going to give loans to Ukraine. And again, eventually this will just fizzle away a little bit at a time, and they'll move their energies back to Syria. And right now the chairman also wanted to know what the U.S. plans to do with any chemical weapons Assad has not yet disclosed. And you have to remember back to, I forgot, it was like November or December, when CNN reported, and I did this in one of my reports, they had special intel that Assad was hiding chemical weapons someplace, and now Clapper's out there and everyone's saying the intel's out there that they're hiding this in the Alawite section of Syria and they could be used, and they want to know what the administration is going to do about this. And again, this is all being set up for the next event, for the next false flag. And they're going to try many different false flags before they get to the main one, because of course they want to get this started, but they will bring it home with the main one here on the U.S. soil if all else fails. And they've been trying their hardest. They tried with the war crimes with the UN. They tried with the Geneva II talks. And they tried with saying that Assad is not removing his chemical weapons, he's stalling. All of this has failed. They tried to get the rebel leaders on the Arab League in one of their seats, and that failed. So they're running out of ideas. So they're going to try many different things. And of course, President Obama, which I did a report on, that he said, he's more concerned about a nuclear weapon going off in Manhattan. And it just so happens at the same time that DHS was going to cut funding for New York City for their nuclear attack preparedness initiative. Very interesting. But Schumer is out there saying, whoa, 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 he just mentioned a nuclear attack? Why is Homeland Security cutting funds for this program? Very interesting. And he went on to say, Schumer said, the Homeland Security Department must recognize the problem with their decision and reverse it immediately. Now, Schumer didn't care about this before, but now they want more funding for Department of Homeland Security because of the threat of a weapon going off. And this went on to say, as President Obama correctly noted, our biggest fear is a nuclear weapon going off in New York City. So why would DHS want to cut funding for such a vital program here? The senator said. They are setting this up, keeping this in your head somewhere in the back, that eventually a event will occur. Might not be in New York, it might be in a different city, and we will see something actually happen. Now, Syria is out there, and they're saying, listen, Turkey is up to something, and they are making their complaints to the UN. Syria has formally called on the United Nations to take all essential measures to halt Turkish involvement in backing military offenses by anti-Damascus militants from its Liwa area against Syria's district. Now, again, they see what is happening. They understand Turkey is up to something, and this is why Erdogan was out there, and he wanted Twitter blocked. He wanted YouTube talk, because what was he planning to do? Well, the video was leaked out. We see what he wanted to do. He wanted to create a false flag event for the central bankers' U.S. government, because we have to remember Erdogan is controlled. He is a puppet government of the United States. And what were they planning to do? Well, they were planning to sneak in 4 men into Syria. Then what they were going to do is they were going to fire missiles into Turkey and say, Syria just started firing at Turkey. We need to go to war. This is how easy it is, and they were just caught. And this is another attempt of a false flag that just failed. Again, they are having a major problem getting this war kicked off. So what they're going to do is they're going to try more things like this. They are most likely going to fail, and then they are going to bring this baby home. And this is where we all should start to worry. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.